Now, how many of you know this person? So I'll get out to put the picture up on screen. There you go. The Grinch, right. Now, what kind of a person is the Grinch? Right? He's a mean one. He's not good. His heart is 2 sizes too small. He's bitter, he's angry, and he's out for revenge. Right? The Grinch is not a nice person. And so the Grinch, he sees all these people who are happy at Christmas, and he decides the best thing for me to do is to steal everything from everyone, and I'll show them. And so he goes out Christmas night, steals all the gifts and decorations from every single person's house in the whole town, carries it all up to the top of a mountain, and gets ready to watch everybody be devastated and sad. And he's just so excited to see the devastation and disappointment in other people. So, today, you can turn that off. For us now, Christmas is just past. We're looking forward to a new year. Still lots of celebration going on. And so we're going to continue our series that we started, that we were doing before Christmas. Going through the book of Genesis. And so in the middle of a festive time, happy time of year, and we're going to look at one of the worst chapters in the whole book of Genesis. I hope you're all super stoked. And because of some of the subject matter in the text, I'm just going to be summarizing the first little while. We're going to look at Genesis 34, and then towards the last half, I'll be reading some. So, the last time we were in the book of Genesis, we saw Jacob wrestled with God, and it was a little bit of a life-changing moment for him. And then he meets his brother, splits up, and he settles in a place called Shechem, which is notable because in Genesis 28, right, Jacob has this vision of angels going up and down from heaven, and Jacob promises that he's going to return to his father's house. And then later on in Genesis 31, God calls him to leave his uncle Laban, and God tells him to return to the land of his father. And so if we look at a map here, you'll see Beersheba is where his parents are from. He left there, goes to Bethel, has that vision, and then he goes very, very far away. And then he comes back to go to where his parents are from, the land of his father, and he gets to Shechem, and he stops. And so it's a little bit of a eyebrow raiser, like, I thought you were going to go back. Why aren't you? Right? You had this life-changing experience, and it seems like you're not totally obeying what God has asked you to do. So, in chapter 34, we are introduced to the only daughter of Jacob, and we know her name's Dinah. Now, Jacob's sons at this point, they're older, they're probably in their 20s, late teens, and Jacob now, he's older, he's not out there running with the sheep and the flocks and looking after them. He's passed that on to his sons. Jacob now just stays at home. He's old, or older at least. And then Dinah decides that she wants to socialize. She wants to get to know the people of the town. So she goes out and she socializes with the ladies of Shechem. And now we might look at that and be like, oh, good for Dinah, right? She's getting out, she's making friends. Oh, it's probably super good for her, right? But Dinah's not living in a Christian world with Christian morals, right? This is a town that would have practiced idol worship and did all sorts of terrible, horrible things like that. And so, our first reaction might be like, oh, that's so great. We should actually be like, oh, that's weird. Or like, that's probably not a really good idea. Right? Jacob's family, up to this point, has been pretty adamant, we're not mixing with the people around us because they're not good people. Like the one time you see they kind of do, right, the brother-in-law Lot, it does not go well. And so they've been pretty adamant, we're not mixing, but now they are. And so it also brings up the question, right? Jacob, the man of the house, the father, the leader, why are you letting your daughter go out and associate with these people? It kind of seems like Jacob is just checked out at this point, and he's neglecting his responsibilities as a father. So Dinah's out socializing, and then tragedy strikes. The prince of that town takes Dinah and does a horrible, evil, wicked thing to her. And then after the prince, who just did that terrible, evil, horrible thing, now says he's in love with Dinah and wants to marry her. And we don't see any remorse on his part, nothing even close to that. He is controlled by greed and desire, and he wants her, and so he tells his dad, go and get her for me. And then Dinah is held at the prince's house. And so Jacob finds out what's happened to his daughter. Now you might expect surely now Jacob is going to step up. He's going to realize I've failed here, and he's going to do something about this. And so Jacob finds out what's happened, and he does nothing. He just sits on the information. He doesn't even tell his sons. He does nothing. And you read this, and you just kind of want to yell at Jacob and be like, what are you doing? Do something at least. But he doesn't. Actually, throughout this whole chapter, Jacob stays remarkably quiet and does nothing. In the meantime, though, Jacob's sons, they hear people talking, and they find out what's happened, and they react like normal people, right? They are furious. And so about the time the brothers arrive, the prince and his father have come to discuss marriage. And so we'll pick it up, Genesis 34, 8, 1 to 12. So Hamer, that's the father of the prince. The prince is also named Shechem, which is a little bit confusing. So Hamer tried to speak with Jacob and his sons. My son Shechem is truly in love with your daughter. He said, please let him marry her. In fact, let's arrange other marriages too. You give us your daughters for our sons, and we'll give our daughters for your sons. And you may live among us. The land is open to you. Settle here and trade with us, and feel free to buy property in this area. Then Shechem himself spoke to Dinah's father and brothers. Please be kind to me and let me marry her, he begged. I will give her whatever you ask, no matter what dowry gift you demand. I will gladly pay it. Just give me the girl as my wife. So these men, they're pulling out all the stops to get this deal through. All right, the terrible thing that happened, they don't even mention it. They just we'll just put that in the past, and we're going forward, and we're going to pretend like it never happened and get this deal done. And so let's see their response. The second half of 13 to 18. Jacob's sons responded deceitfully to Shechem and his father, Hamer. They said to them, we couldn't possibly allow this because you're not circumcised. It would be a disgrace for our sister to marry a man like you, but here's a solution. If every man among you will be circumcised like we are, then we will give you our daughters, and we'll take your daughters for ourselves. We will live among you and become one people. But if you don't agree to be circumcised, we'll take her and be on our way. Hamer and his son Shechem agreed to their proposal. So there's a lot that's pretty shocking about this passage, but the first thing that jumps out is who responds, right? They've come to ask Dinah to be able to marry Shechem, and you would think, well, obviously the father is going to be the one who steps in and makes things right. But that's not what happens, right? Dinah's brothers are the one that steps in and negotiate this. Jacob is nowhere to be found. He stays silent and doesn't act at all. And so the boys feel like justice needs to be done, so they come up with this plan and say, if you guys do this thing, everything's going to be good. We'll be able to marry each other's, and it's going to be great. So we might look at that and like, wow, that's a hilarious plan, right? It's going to be smart. It's going to be effective. They're going to get what they deserve. This is great. But how would you feel if a pastor from another country used communion, poisoned it, invited bad people over, and used that to get rid of them? That's a little bit messed up. Right? That using communion to get revenge it's already bad, but using that way to get it done that's gross. And that's kind of what we have here. Right? God had given circumcision as a symbol of the promise that God was going to keep between his people and God, and they're using that very thing that God gave them and using it to get revenge, take matters in their own hands. And so, let's see what happens. Verse 19 to 24. Shechem wasted no time in acting on this request, for he wanted Jacob's daughter desperately. Shechem was a highly respected member of his family, and he went to his father Hamor to present this proposal to the leaders at the town gate. The men are our friends, they said. Let's invite them to live here among us and trade freely. Look, the land is large enough for them. We can take their daughters as wives and let them marry ours. But they will consider staying here and becoming one people with us, only if all of our men are circumcised, just as they are. But if we do this, all their livestock and possessions will eventually be ours. Come, let's agree to their terms and let them settle here among us. So all the men of the town council agreed with Hamor and Shechem, and every male in the town was circumcised. The other thing, so they go back in the town, they convince them, and Jacob must have been super rich because they're all like, that sounds good to us. We're going to get all of that stuff too? Sure, let's do it. The other thing that we should mention again is, where's Jacob? Jacob either he has no idea what his sons are planning and is in favor of like having a family marriage pact with these people who are not good, or option B, he's aware of their plan and he supports it. Either way, Jacob's in the wrong again. Right? God and his forefathers have been adamant, we're not mixing with these people, and Jacob seems like he's good with it. So, verses 25 to 29. But 3 days later, when their wounds were still sore, two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, who were Dinah's full brothers, took their swords and entered the town without opposition. They slaughtered every male there, including Hamor and his son Shechem. They killed him with their swords, then took Dinah from Shechem's house and returned her to their camp. Meanwhile, the rest of Jacob's sons arrived. Finding the men slaughtered, they plundered the town because of their sister. They seized all the flocks and herds and donkeys, everything they could lay hands on, both inside the town and outside in the fields. They looted all their wealth, plundered their houses. They took all their little children and wives and led them away as captives. So they saved their sister. They avenged what happened. And all the defenseless, mostly innocent men were murdered, and the women and children were stolen, and the town was plundered. Now, I have 3 younger sisters, and I have 2 daughters, and when I read this story, I want to cheer on what these brothers did, because they stood up for their sister, they refused to let what happened go unpunished. And I want to be like, well, these guys deserved it. They were bad. And while the brothers' motivation maybe is honorable, their actions are super wrong. Right? What the brothers did was murder an entire town. That's not justice. That's revenge. It's not war, it's murder. And so while I'm empathetic to the brothers' motivation, they are definitely in the wrong. These are young men who are acting out of intense anger. And for us, God tells us that the anger of man does not bring about good or right actions. Right? For us, if we are ever motivated by I'm going to get even or I'm going to get revenge, you are not going to act in a way that pleases God. The Bible repeatedly encourages us to get rid of anger, and it never encourages people to act out of anger. Now let's finish this chapter, and then we'll look at where I think most of the blame lies. Verses 30 and 31. Afterward, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have ruined me. You've made me a stink among the people of this land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. We are so few that they will join forces and crush us. I will be ruined, and my entire household will be wiped out. But why should we let him treat our sister like that?" They retorted angrily. So finally, Jacob talks. After all this that's happened, and the thing that moves him to actually do something, is that Simeon and Levi has ruined his reputation with the surrounding people. Right? They might come and attack him. And you know what? It makes sense. Right? The whole neighboring people might come and attack him, and they might be done. So it makes sense why he's reacting like this. But at the same time, where were you for all the rest? Right? You did nothing as your daughter, who you're responsible for, went and socialized with these people. You did nothing when she was attacked. You did nothing when they came and negotiated. You did nothing when the brothers proposed this plan. And now it's all done. And now you want to talk. And it's no wonder why the brothers respond this way, saying, like, you weren't doing anything about it, so we had to. Right? Jacob is sowing seeds of hatred between himself and his sons because he isn't doing the job that God gave him. He is a bad father. And so, I want to ask the fathers here, how are you doing? Like, what are you doing to lead your family? Are you a man who is laying down his life for his family? And not just like a hypothetical, I would die for my wife and my kids, right? In your actions that you're doing every day, are you showing your wife, are you showing your kids that their needs are more important than your own? Are you more interested in them or yourself? A mentor of mine once told me that as a husband and a father, home time does not mean you time, right? Going home means now you get to serve your family. And something I've been convicted of is that oftentimes when I get home, I'm tired, I just want to sit and not think about things. And so oftentimes my family and my kids don't get my full attention, right? It's really tempting to I just want to watch something on TV or scroll on my phone for a little while because it's been a long day. And we love to look down at people like Jacob and be like, wow, you're such a terrible person. But we do things that are similar and think, oh, that's fine. Right? I want to encourage you, fathers and mothers too, right? Don't grow weary in pointing your kids to what's right. We have a lot of great teenagers in our church and other kids too, but I know sometimes that they can be stubborn and rebellious and frustrating, and it's easy to grow weary as parents and be like, okay, fine, just do whatever, I don't care anymore. But don't grow weary in fighting the same battles over and over and over with your kids. Right? Don't give up in doing what you know is right, because that's the role that God has placed you in. And we all depend on God to keep pointing us in the right direction over and over and over again, because we too make the same mistakes over and over again. Lots. Right? Don't be like Jacob, who just took his hands off and said, fine, do whatever you want. Right? Fathers, our role is a hard role. The Bible is full of amazing men who were horrible fathers. Right? Guys like Jacob, like Eli, like David, all failed their children miserably. My dad has joked with me that oftentimes Mother's Day is when you tell mothers how amazing and wonderful they are, and then Father's Day is when we tell all the fathers how terrible they are and that they need to shape up. My hope is that that's not how you feel this morning, right? And I hope you're reminded how important your role as a husband, as a father is, and that you're encouraged to continue to lay your life down for the sake of your family, because that's what Jesus does for you. Right? Not out of a sense of guilt and shame, but out of a sense of love for your family and out of love for God. Now, earlier, we talked about the Grinch. And so, in the Grinch, there is a little girl who treats the Grinch with kindness, even though he is a terrible, horrible person. Does anyone remember her name? Cindy Lou. In the Jim Carrey version of the Grinch has just stolen absolutely everything from the village, and he's sitting there, and then out pops Cindy Lou, and she tells him nobody should be alone at Christmas. And he's there with the Grinch, and then all this stuff happens. The Grinch gets treated with kindness, even though he did nothing at all to deserve the kindness from this girl. So this is a pretty dark and discouraging chapter. Everyone's in the wrong, and there's horrible things happening, and there's not a lot of hope. But I want to end by reading the next verse because it's amazingly hopeful. So 35 verse 1 says, "Then God said to Jacob, 'Get ready and move to Bethel and settle there. Build an altar there to God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau.'" So Jacob had stopped where he was not supposed to. He had failed in his responsibility as a father. All these terrible, messed up things happened because of where he stayed and because of he didn't do what he was supposed to, right? The entire village is murdered. They kidnapped wives and kids. His daughter was abused. And nobody is apologizing for anything. Nobody is seeking God. In fact, in chapter 34, God is not mentioned once. And so all of this happened right after something like a conversion that happened for Jacob. And we might look at these people and say, clearly, this is a messed up family, and there is no hope for them. And then God speaks, and he doesn't fly off the handle. He doesn't say, use threats. He just calls Jacob to follow him. All right, Jacob is falling back into his old ways, doing what he wants, and God doesn't give up on him. He calls him again, follow me. Right? It's almost like he's saying, you've had fun doing your own thing for a little while. Are you going to come and follow me again, or are you just going to stay where you are and just keep doing it? Right? There is going to be lifelong consequences for what Jacob did, but God doesn't abandon him. He calls him to follow me again. Now, maybe you're in a similar place, right? Maybe you are overwhelmed by some things that you've done, and maybe there's some doubt in you, like, how could I ever find a way out? Or maybe you're a Christian, and you can't believe some of the things that you have done, and you wonder, maybe God has given up on me. Maybe I've failed too much. Or maybe you just look back at this past year and think, I thought I would be a lot further along than this. I feel like I've just disappointed God over and over again. And God is calling out to you, telling you, follow me. Don't just keep living in shame and guilt. I once had a pastor tell me that every moment spent living in guilt and shame is a moment spent away from the presence of God. Don't just live in shame for what you've done. Look to God and follow him. Don't keep just doing your own thing. God's way is the way that leads to life. And so as we wrap up another year and start a new one, I want to encourage you to follow Jesus. Follow him. Right? Don't let shame and guilt and sin keep you away from following Jesus today. And if you've never known Jesus, if you've never given your life to him, I would encourage you to do so, right? Just following yourself in your own ways is not going to lead to anywhere good. Jesus offers you forgiveness and peace and freedom from guilt and shame and relationship with him both now and forever. And Jesus calls you, follow me. Don't ignore him. Let's pray. God, I thank you for how good you are. God, as there's a lot of terrible things that happen in this chapter, I pray that it would encourage us to know that if you don't give up on people like this, that you won't give up on us. Lord, thank you for the love that you give us every day that we absolutely do not deserve. And I pray that we would show the people around us that same love that you give us. Lord, I pray especially for us as fathers and as parents that you would help us to lead our kids to what's right, and that you would help us to not grow weary in doing that. Amen.